Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Andrew Moran, Sarah Cowgill, Jeff Charles, and Graham Noble. And this is the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. On today's episode, where did President Reagan's shining city on a hill go? We'll take a look at the fight for free speech in our segment called Twitter Says Must We? The Conservative Five will talk about illegal immigration in our segment, They're Coming to America in Droves. And we'll discuss what happened to America's once most influential political voice in the separation of church and power. Then there's the latest struggle for parents in the controversial Stop Teaching Our Kids About Sex segment. And finally, we'll have a few laughs in Just for Fun, Volume 9, The Price Ain't Right. All this and more coming up in this edition of the Conservative Five. It started with a Twitter poll. Elon Musk asked if the platform protected free speech. The simple question sparked wild rumors and loads of chatter. And 2 weeks later, Musk owns the lion's share of Twitter. Gotta say, the man works fast. And now Musk has made an offer to buy the entire kit and caboodle and remove it from public trading. It's rumored the Twitter employees are triggered. Andrew, you've been all over this story like a cheap suit. Sorry. But what about Musk's share of $54 per share?
Wait, is that equipment on my jacket? It's not cheap. It cost me $50. Come on. But anyway,
No,
so it cost the amount of a share that Elon Musk is offering.
That's right.
But yeah. So the deal's about a $41 billion in cash. This is a generous offer when you consider that the whole value of Twitter is about $36 billion. The company's been on a downturn. User growth has been falling. The platform's reputation has deteriorated. Many market analysts who I've spoken to, they say that this company over the last several years has missed so many opportunities to capitalize on some momentum. Like Donald Trump, for example. I mean, they may not agree with his politics, but they saw that he was a huge boon for the company. Elon Musk, he's been just trolling the entire Twitterverse for weeks now. You see that Twitter poll, and then he did a recent Twitter poll about changing the name from Twitter to Titter. The edit button, which I'm completely against for everyone to know. He wants subscribers to pay Dogecoin for that monthly subscription service. So overall, I think Musk taking this company private and transforming it to it, he's done so wonders for SpaceX, for the Boring Company, Starlink, all these things. Put it in his hands, he'll turn into gold.
I know you're skating past whether they will or they won't. So I'm going to go straight to Jeff, because Jeff, hardly a moment goes by when your finger is not on the Twitter button. Admit it.
This is true, and Andrew is right. I mean, Twitter has made a series of bad decisions. They gave into the woke mob by getting rid of Donald Trump, which was a really stupid thing to do for a really stupid reason. And now I'm seeing people on Twitter that they're terrified that Elon Musk might actually be in control of Twitter. They're doing the whole, if Elon Musk takes over Twitter, I'm leaving the platform. It's the same thing that all these actors and actresses say when they have a president that they don't like. Oh, I'm going to leave the country. They're not going to leave. They're going to stay, and it's going to be awesome. Now, I don't know if this whole deal is going to happen. I'm sure that there are a lot of forces that do not want this to happen, but if it does, I am totally here for it.
Sarah, are the Twitter people triggered?
Twitter people are triggered. I mean, yes, they're huddling in their little workspaces, and they're, consulting and trying to find out how to get through the week. It's the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen from grown adults. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
All right. But Graham, actually, you've been banned on Twitter since before Hitler was born. Right?
Yes, indeed. I was actually permanently suspended from Twitter before it was cool to be permanently suspended from Twitter.
Oh, okay. So you
Trailblazer
for Donald Trump to be suspended, and doesn't the Ayatollah and Putin, aren't they still on Twitter? I mean, what's your take on this?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, I almost don't want to use the H word, hypocrisy, because it's everybody realizes this is a complete joke, that whether or not you get thrown off of Twitter is entirely due to your political affiliations within the United States. You know, if you're on the right and you're very vocal and outspoken on Twitter, you're going to get canned. And yet there are people out there who are actually guilty of major, human rights abuses and enormous amounts of misery and suffering. And of course, they still get to tweet. But you know what?
Yeah, but are they mean? Are they mean? Do they write mean?
Exactly.
Well,
right
get to the bottom of that.
Actually, you know what? You got a point there, Sarah, because maybe these people, they may be maniacs and terrorists and all the rest of it, but then their tweets aren't quite as mean and spiteful as Donald Trump's.
They're more articulate.
Perhaps.
Jeff,
Yeah,
I have to ask you a quick question, Jeff. Do you find you censor yourself on a regular basis? I mean, do you find what you're doing is actively censoring yourself as your thumbs are on the keyboard?
Not too much. I do let loose on Twitter. It's just that when I let loose, it may not be as objectionable to them as what other people say. But I've been suspended twice on Twitter for making fun of people on the left. So yeah, I mean, I don't really censor myself, but at the same time, they can't get everybody. So I think that's why I'm still on.
Yeah,
Well,
Jeff,
Dodging bullets.
Jeff makes a point there. I mean, if you look at one of the two most popular Twitter accounts for conservatives is Define L's and Libs of TikTok. They were released and suspended, and all they do is share tweets of other leftists who are just being hypocrites. All they do, and yet they got suspended for doing that. I highly doubt that a left-leaning account making fun of conservatives would be as censored. And one more thing too about leftists are complaining that a billionaire like Elon Musk should not buy Twitter. But how is that any different from other billionaire leftists buying newspapers? Look at Jeff Bezos. He bought a specific Washington newspaper. No one complained. John Henry, who I shall never complain about because he gave the Red Sox 4 world championships in 20 years. He bought the Boston Globe. Warren Buffett, he made, as Graham said, he made buying print newspapers cool again. So, there's no difference. Elon Musk, he's just a controversial figure who leftists don't like his opinions about.
Well, it's interesting. Do you think actually that they are going to go for this? And number one, and number two, Sarah, what I'm really interested in is whether there is, going to be political fallout. In other words, they are going to take their toys and go home.
I would say that it's a good deal. Nobody passes up a good deal. They're in this for the money, not for the glory. Nobody really knows who's behind the scenes. And so, now that we've got the big flash in the pan, let's roll with it. I think they'll take it. And will there be fallout? There might be a bunch of liberals crying, but, it could turn the platform around to where you could actually, talk freely. Imagine that. And that could have big, huge boon for Twitter anyway.
Let me just ask one other question. Anybody can take this, but I mean, do you think that this is an interesting thing from Musk versus Trump? Trump tried to kind of build the whole thing from scratch, whereas Musk is like, no, I'm not going to build it from scratch. I'm just going to take what I've got and tweak it and make it right.
Yeah, I made that exact point in my article last week, analyzing the situation. Instead of putting all these resources and investments and manpower into building something from scratch that probably won't even work, like Truth Social or Parler, he just bought something that was already there and tried to make it better. Imagine if somebody does the same thing with Facebook. Someone tries to buy that $300 billion company. That would be such a huge boon for free speech advocates. So overall, yeah, buying it is a lot better than building it.
Let me ask you a quick question. Do you think Musk can afford both? Just saying.
Well, his fortune is about $300 billion, and this company is worth $36 billion, and Facebook is worth $300 billion. Also, one point too is that he's not buying Twitter with his own money. He's going to do the traditional capital market route. He's going to use debt financing, other investors do it. He's not just taking his own fortune and putting money into it. So he's using the traditional values of that.
That's because he's
I think the real question though is that if he does take over Twitter, will anything change?
Well, yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, you know what? There's something I think that's is important to point out, and that is that Musk actually tweeted something maybe about a week or two ago, possibly maybe just before he announced the fact that he bought his stake in Twitter. And I think it's very important what he tweeted, because you see a lot of people will say, well, social media companies, you know what, they don't have to respect the First Amendment because they're private companies. They can do whatever they want. The Constitution kind of doesn't apply to them. That's not actually true. And there is a Supreme Court ruling, off the top of my head, I can't remember which case it is, but there is a Supreme Court ruling that actually says that even a private company cannot regulate speech in the public square. And Musk has caught on to this, and he tweeted a couple of weeks ago or so that basically, these social media platforms are de facto now public squares. They are, because they're universally accessible. They don't charge for you to use them, so anyone can get on there. De facto, they are de facto the public square, and therefore these companies, Twitter, Facebook, they really. I'm surprised nobody's taken them to court on this, because the way I see it, judging by a Supreme Court precedent, they don't actually have any right to regulate speech on their platforms.
Well, and you could also say in a way
someone's going to get fired. The little algorithm minion is going to get fired, apparently.
Well, you could make an argument that in a way it's sort of a public utility. But anyway, Musk is hardcore.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hardcore about keeping America's First Amendment from being canceled. But the Twitterverse has taken on some rather high stakes battles as well. Who will triumph? Well, we'll keep you in the loop. Thanks, panel. It's been said that good fences make good neighbors. Unfortunately, the Biden administration hasn't quite figured this out. 1.7 million illegal immigrants have entered this country in less than a year. But Biden says no wall, no Title 42, nada. How's this working out? It's a real no bueno, folks. That's how. Biden and company are beating their own records. The nation now sits poised to have the most illegal immigrants since 1960, which is basically when they started counting. Sarah, you and I have covered immigration in concert for some time now for LibertyNation.com. Is Biden or the vice president, pray tell, going to do anything to reverse the course? Are they just fine with this mess?
They're in a giant publicity mess at this point. When you've got the governor of Texas loading people on buses and sending them to a couple of blocks away from the Capitol in the swamp, that it tells you that frustration levels are extremely high. They don't have the resources to be, taking up arms. That you're going to get the problems on the border. More people are going to come across, and they're being overrun as it is. So you're going to have people on the border armed and ready to take care of anybody on their property. They're going to have a whole bunch of undocumented illegal people coming through. There's no place to put them. There's no resources to feed them, clothe them, give them money. It's really not up to the states that are doing this. I mean, the federal government is supposed to protect this country, and by allowing all these people to come in, they are not protecting anybody. They're in the little DC bubble. They're not down on the border towns. They're not in Arizona or California or New Mexico or Texas. So, it isn't fair, and it's going to cause bigger problems, and the bigger problems will be seen at the midterms. That's where you're going to see a lot of that turnout.
Jeff, is this the Democratic strategy, or is Biden trying to just undo all of Trump's policy?
He's trying to undo all of Trump's policies, because I think they're looking at long-term gains for the Democratic Party as long as they're able to let in as many people as possible. But I think we're missing the good news here. COVID-19 is no longer an issue at the border. If you get to the southern border and you have COVID-19, it disappears, according to the Biden administration, because they're lifting Title 42, which allows our Border Patrol to turn away people who come from countries that have had issues with COVID-19. But it's weird because they want to extend mask mandates on airplanes and in airports. So in the interior of the country, you can still get COVID, but at the border, you can't. And at the lifting Title 42 is going to bring about another influx, another surge at the southern border. I'm predicting it right now. After May, we're going to see more caravans. We're going to see more people coming up here wearing "Let Us In Joe Biden" on their shirts. And this is what they want. At this point, like I've said it before, I can't attribute this to incompetence. This is deliberate. They want to import as many people legally and illegally as possible. And hopefully, if and when Republicans retake Congress, they can do maybe something to put a stop to this until we get somebody in the White House.
Yeah. Meanwhile, to Jeff's point, Graham, it's interesting. If you really think about the COVID, tentacles of coming across the border, these people are smushed into cars, smushed into vans, smushed into small areas. They're walking together. They're sleeping together. I mean, it just does seem like a bit of a petri dish, doesn't it?
Apparently there is, there's no risk apparently from this large mass of humanity coming in without us knowing any having no knowledge of their medical histories, whether or not they've had COVID, whether or not they've been vaccinated. Right. One could talk about the ridiculousness of this immigration system all day. But with respect to the virus, as Jeff said, it's like it's magically, apparently you are magically cured of COVID when you cross the border from Mexico to the US. So I think a lot of people who are worried about COVID, they should, maybe they should do that. Maybe they should take a little trip to Mexico and then come back across the border and they'll be fine.
Andrew, what are the economics of adding 1.7 million people to the country this year, no matter where, if you're busing them to Martha's Vineyard or to Washington, D.C. or whatever? By the way, if they get to volunteer to go to Martha's Vineyard, I suggest they say yes.
Before going to, I just want to add to Jeff's point about caravans in May. I think he's absolutely correct, because right now, what you're witnessing in many impoverished nations, especially, is a food crisis, because food prices are out of control, shortages are happening everywhere. And what happens when you have a food crisis? You see political and social upheaval. What happens? They leave their countries and they head up to the United States. Now, when it comes to your question, it's going to have tremendous economic pressures, because what you have right now is many states, they're subsidizing illegal immigration. I've made this point a couple of times in C5 before. You look at New York State, for example, they handed out $2.1 billion to illegal immigrants in coronavirus aid. The state of Connecticut offers $1 million to coronavirus aid during the pandemic. Florida spends more than $100 million for children without a disability receiving Medicaid. You add that to the totals, you're going to spend even more on all this illegal immigrant aid and benefits. So this has a tremendous economic pressures, especially for state governments that are still reeling from the pandemic and having all these budget deficits and adding to their state debts. So this kind of a huge fiscal pressure for the country. I mean, the federal government, of course, they're the root cause of the problem, but the states are the ones who are incentivizing a lot of these people coming across the border. Well, I think New York State, I mean, these people come from hot climates, but they go to New York State, which is freezing all the time, and it's now a dilapidated state. Sorry to Tim Donner, but you see all those perks. So why not go to New York State and get your hands in the pot of all those billions in aid?
Yeah. And Sarah, it all comes down to politics. We know that, but we've covered this before on C5. And I think it's interesting, the Democrats are just betting that all these people are going to come over to their side, but that's not necessarily a done deal anymore, right?
It is not necessarily a done deal. In fact, the Hispanic numbers are increasingly heading towards the right. So, they have a different set of values. They're usually very religious, conservatively religious. And that's, something that the GOP is enticing. You want to be in a party that takes care of you, that wants to, know you, and we will protect you, and we will protect, life at conception. All of these things are something that the Hispanic population, whether they're coming in from Cuba or Mexico or Guatemala, that's something that resonates with them. You just got to be able to get the message to them. And numbers are changing rapidly, which is scaring the heck out of the Democrats. So, in reality, this is not going to be a good solution. You've got a lot of people just coming across the border. Nobody can afford to take care of them. I mean, and if you want to give money from Connecticut, well, we'll send you a busload. But once you get that into the system, the Democrats aren't going to help them. It's going to be wherever they end up, and that's a state. And if they end up in Texas, if they end up in Arizona, if they end up in Indiana, or anywhere in the Midwest, they're probably going to be conservative.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that they're getting ready to launch the first conservative Hispanic network. But anyway, it's the federal government's job to keep the nation safe. This administration doesn't seem to be grasping that reality. Instead, it's falling on the shoulders of American citizens living in border towns, just like you said, Sarah. And they're being invaded and overrun. They're frustrated. They're out of options. Doesn't look like this is going well. Thanks, panel. Has anyone else noticed that churches across America are having a heck of a time reaching their flock? A recent poll tells us that although most Americans pray regularly, they sure aren't doing it in church. Organized religion has loosened the reins on issues like divorce, abortion, and sexual orientation, just to name a few. So why aren't more people seeking that inclusive church family to call home? Jeff, you are a longtime churchgoer, and you've written a lot about this for LibertyNation.com. What gives?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that question, Lisa, it's pretty complex based on the research that I've done and the pastors that I've spoken with. But yeah, church attendance has plummeted. And this was even before COVID-19. And a lot of people after COVID-19, after they're able to do church services online, they're not really going back. So if they are attending church, they are doing so more online. But even so, America still remains spiritual. We haven't really moved further towards atheism. It's just more that we are in a situation where people want to be spiritual, but not really want to be involved in an organized religion or be involved in a religious community. And the survey that I looked at said that people even understand the value of belonging to a church community, but they're just not doing it. There are probably a lot of reasons for this. I think a lot of it, though, has to do with Christianity's exclusive claims, but also with the fact that they don't really feel the love of Christ when they go in. They'll see the show, they'll see all the good stuff, but I think the church doesn't have a balance. Before, it was a lot of hellfire and brimstone. People didn't like that, of course, but now it seems like a lot of churches have gone full the other direction where they don't even mention sin. It's basically a motivational speech. I won't name names, even though I want to, but there are a lot of high-profile pastors who just are more like a Tony Robbins more than an actual preacher. So I think if the church gets more of a balance between the two and actually provides a transformative experience, really that's something that the Holy Spirit has to provide. But if they're able to facilitate that, then maybe they can gain more influence. But at this point, it's tough. It's not looking too good.
Or they could do something really novel like preach the gospel. But anyway, the church, Sarah, the church used to be a powerful tool in the political process. It had its heyday, I guess, maybe moral majority, 80s, yeah. 90s, but that seems to have waned quite a bit. What do you think about the fact that the church is no longer a powerful political tool?
Well, nationally, I'm with you. It's not doing well. It used to be the moral majority, and then they were attacked. The media went after them. Everything was, the moral majority, and they made it sound bad. So therefore, we reversed course. If you look at the local, like small towns and rural areas across, like where I live, for instance, Sunday mornings, parking lots are packed. So there's still that fellowship, the community, the camaraderie. They do good things in the community for one another. They take care of the kids, they take care of old people, they take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. Nationally, that has stopped. So you just don't have that powerful voice like you used to have. Yeah. I mean, you had Martin Luther King. That was the powerful voice. That was, a religious man in the 60s changing things. But there is no one now that can compare to any of the people in the past that were powerhouses. Like Jeff says, they're almost like entertainers. It's almost like you're turning on Netflix and binging, the latest show on preachers.
Graham, I wonder to what extent COVID really has impacted this, and not to overshare, but there was barely a Sunday that I missed for a good 25 years in church. And then COVID happened. And then, because our church is actually in the state of Maryland, they went nuts on this mask business. Every week you had to wear a mask. Well, we went once, and there's just something weird about singing a hymn through a mask, having the choir masked. It just felt very odd. And, so therefore, I wonder if people are finding Zoom and the internet just a much easier thing to do rather than get dressed up, put their hair together, put their makeup on, drive to church, get the kids all out of their jammies at Sunday morning and staying home and watching it online.
The whole shutdown thing during COVID, I think, was about dismantling a lot of American traditions. I mean, it really was. You couldn't go to restaurants, you couldn't go to bars, and also, of course, you couldn't go to church. But getting back to what we were saying about church attendance, I particularly just want to touch very briefly on what Jeff was saying. And I think, from my perspective, and I'm kind of almost like an outsider, I believe that the overall kind of decline in kind of religious, not necessarily belief in God, but in religious observance is got to do a lot, I think, with, kind of televangelism. It's got to do with the introduction of kind of social justice into churches. And I think, the way that the church would kind of save itself, if you like, no pun intended, is by actually getting back to making church services about studying biblical text. That's just what I think,
Well, amen to that. We're going to give you the last word, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm not going to provide my take on religion of God. I don't want to insult anybody. I'll just summarize by saying between Pope Francis and air conditioner, I'll choose an air conditioner than any of that stuff. But I think the main story in today's society is that the state has become the God. The government has become the chief religion. We have to worship at the altar of Congress and Supreme Court and presidents. We always look to the government as the answer to all of our problems. That if the government doesn't intervene in something, then if you don't believe what the government's doing, then you're committing a sin. You're committing a cardinal sin. And then the green agenda is the worst. I mean, that's a cult in itself, and everyone's worshiping, whatever the book of Al Gore and the book of, global warming, all that nonsense. So it's the state that's become the religion, not so much, Jesus Christ and all the teachings of God. But I will say, that, I think it was Arthur Schopenhauer said that it's better to never been born than it is to suffer pain, which stolen from Schopenhauer, who uttered those same words. So that's I'll combine those two with my take on religion, society, and my personal views on God.
Okay, that's a little obtuse, but we'll go with it. Church.
And Andrew, just remember that Al Gore invented the internet. So please, have a little more respect for the man.
Yeah, please. Well, church, what was once the most prominent influence on American life, both socially and politically, has clearly lost its oomph, so to speak. And the landscape is certainly changing around, whether we like it or not. But let me finish by saying a very happy Easter to all our Christian friends. Conservatives are fighting back against early and extreme sex education in the classroom. Florida's landmark stance prohibits teachers from coaching kids on sexual orientation or gender identity. And now several states have followed suit. And that makes the Biden administration, downright furious. But why? Who wants their 5 to 8-year-old kid taught about any kind of sex, let alone something they could not possibly comprehend at such a tender age? I'm almost afraid to call on you, but no pain, no gain. Graham, what do you say?
Well, Lisa, I think the first point and the most important point about all of this is that people need to understand that the radical left's promotion of so-called trans rights, and specifically the insistence that children as young as 9 years old or even much younger are learning about gender identity, is that this has got nothing to do with tolerance or equity or equality or the protection of anybody's rights. That's all nonsense. That's a cover. What this is about, it's nothing less than an attack on traditional moral values. What these people are attempting is the breaking down of the very fabric of society. That sounds like maybe so hyperbolic, but it's not. That's what they're doing. This is the destruction of traditional morality. Also, I think people should know that there's another agenda at play here. You see, if you raise an entire generation of people to believe that men can have babies, then you've conditioned that generation to doubt everything, to believe nothing. You've basically unmoored them from reality. And you've created a state of uncertainty, almost nihilism. You've created a state of uncertainty and doubt so great that these people will eventually cry out for the government to tell them what to believe.
Yeah, that's the problem, Jeff. I feel when the government starts getting involved in this, but they have to sort of, because the education system has really gone sideways.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the public educational system is the government. So, I mean, the government should be, they should be stopping this. I mean, this is a whole agenda, and it's exactly what Graham just said. This is part and parcel of an overall effort to indoctrinate children. It's not just the gender identity and the sexuality. It's also involves concepts related to critical race theory. It's designed to create a new generation of far left activists who are going to push for this stuff. The thing is, there's two types of people who oppose these laws. The first kind are concerned that it could be used to discriminate against LGBTQ people. I don't agree with that, but okay, I can understand that. Some of the language is vague, fine, whatever. Then the other group are people who actually want these children to learn more about sex and gender identity at a younger age, but they don't want to say it right out because it's impossible to defend. And this is why I've been getting on to conservatives, because we need to make them defend it. No, we don't need to defend the law. Ask them, why do you want teachers instructing little kids 7 years old and younger on matters relating to sexuality and gender identity? Make them defend it. This is how we win this battle. And by the way, we are already winning. The polling shows that even Democratic voters are in favor of the provisions of Florida's law. So I think we have to keep on this, but at the same time, we have to recognize these people are not in touch with the mainstream, but they're still trying their best. I will never understand why, because it's a losing issue. But if they want to lose, they can lose.
Right. But Andrew, you have two small kids. I mean, this is a slippery slope. You start with this gender identity business. And I have read quite a bit about there's a move afoot to make pedophilia, socially acceptable. I mean, I think this makes most Americans shudder. And, what say you about
this is why the Democrats are just losing, because there is no common sense anymore in this party, because they want to appeal to this fringe minority. And I remember there was a controversy because a lot of LGBT advocates, they want to include the P word, pedophilia, into that acronym. So that's just astounding. What I'm terrified is that if a kid goes to a school, and the teacher's this radical left-wing feminist, transgender, blue hair Smurf, the kid's going to say, hey, I'm a girl today, and then they're going to say, oh, you're a girl, you have to have puberty blockers, or you have to cut off your penis, you have to do all these things. Because my kid, he has quite the imagination. He'll come up to me 1 minute, say, oh, I'm a pretty girl, and the next moment he'll say, I'm a T-Rex. But I don't say, we got to shave off your arms now to your elbows, look like you're a Tyrannosaurus Rex. We don't do that. I mean, these people are mold the minds of kids. They're the ones who look after these kids for 18 years or 13 years, and it's just outright terrifying that these people believe these things, and they're the ones who are teaching this. They're not schools anymore. They're indoctrination centers, occupied by left-wing theorists who are just absolutely, they defy any reality. They're like the mind of Joe Biden and devoid of any common sense whatsoever. It's terrifying. My wife and I, we're looking for private schools, hoping that their curriculum won't teach this nonsense. I mean, we go to a public library and they have freaking drag queen story time, so we just don't visit that library anymore. It's terrifying because I have 3-year-olds and I don't want them to be exposed to this nonsense.
Yeah, Sarah, where is the winning game on this politically? I mean, I don't see it, but maybe I'm just too.
I don't think anybody is looking to put a check in the win column. I'm going to go with Jeff on this one. I think it's just a matter of indoctrinating, and we keep turning a blind eye a little bit to it. We're horrified, and we're like, oh goodness, and then we don't do anything. So I agree. I think you point the finger and you stand up and you ask the president and you ask the vice president and anybody else, why is this a good idea? And be pointed. Don't be open and vague. Why is it a good idea to teach my 5-year-old about transgender, gender identity, and sex at 5 years old? Tell me why. And I think that's the way you fight back. You have to fight back. We can't just keep letting this go on.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Conservative, I think if conservatives credit, they are pushing back. I mean, homeschooling rates are on the rise, private school attendance, submission or enrollments are on the rise. So conservatives are fighting back. They're using their pocketbook and where their child studies as a way to fight against the state. But to think that this is the hill to die on, teaching 5-year-olds about, the different flavors of gender and sexuality, it's poppycock. I mean, what happened in 5 years? Bill Maher makes his case too. What happened 5 years ago? This would have been people would have scoffed at this, but now it's just, to think that a woman can have a penis on MSNBC. What the heck is going on in society?
And Andrew's right, actually. I mean, according to the numbers, public school attendance has dropped, and it's not just because of COVID. They haven't recovered yet because people are exercising different options, co-ops, private schools, charters, homeschooling. There are a lot of people even calling for a mass exodus from the public school system, which might be what we need if they keep pushing this stuff.
I only have 2 words for that: school choice. Anyway, It's a sad state of affairs when states have to legislate what should be common sense. But here we are. Thanks, panel. Hi, folks. The Conservative Five, at least every now and then, try to have a bit of fun. And this week is no exception. We're going to throw the Biden administration under the bus in a new game called The Price Ain't Right. Forgive my poor grammar, and I've already been chastised for it. But anyway, we're mixing things up a bit. A few more rules and flexibility and everything all mixed together. Who wants to be boring, right? So, Andrew, we're going to make you the Price Ain't Right host because you're our economist. So I'm going to hand the the baton over to you.
Hey, hello, and welcome to our debut segment called The Price Ain't Right, the game show where you need to consume a couple of bottles of Pepto-Bismol to swallow price inflation. Oh, who are we kidding? Who can afford Pepto-Bismol in this economy? I guess we'll just move into Nancy Pelosi's home and get drunk on her vintage wine dated 1883, which is the same year as her birth. But before we get started, did any of you see Vice President Kamala Harris' remarks about price inflation? Yeah, she said that it's important to acknowledge that prices are rising. Isn't this the beauty of America today? Anyone can grow up to be the president. Anyone who doesn't grow up can be vice president. But in all seriousness here, have you seen the price of inflation lately? I heard that the rapper 50 Cent had to adjust for inflation, so he now calls himself a $1.50. So let's get started here. First, let's begin with none other than the Lady of Liberty, the Queen of Journalism, and the disinfector of the swamp, Lisa Donner. Now, I know you need this product first thing in the morning to survive throughout the day, especially when having to deal with 100 different messages from Sarah talking about Yellowknife Northwest Territories, or is that the show Yellowstone? Haha, got you there. So coffee in 2019, a pound of coffee was an average of $4.14. What is it today?
All right. Is this the Price is Right rules? In other words, I have to give it, but I can't go over?
Yes.
Okay. 414. 519.
Close. The correct answer is 525. The reason coffee prices are soaring because of terrible harvest in South America, soaring demand in the wake of reopening, and Starbucks trying to buy the world's supply to ensure Joe Biden stays awake during any ceremony he attends. Okay, number 2 on the list will be, if you've been following Jeff Charles' Twitter account, Jeff on the right, he is impressing his new lady, Keisha Jones, with his cooking skills, clogging her arteries with every meat under the sun. So, Jeff, I know this is your favorite type of product, vegan sausage. Haha, just kidding. So let's go with bacon. In 2019, a pound of bacon averaged $5.61. Today, what do you think it is? And before you answer, it is true that you can take out a line of credit to buy your next meal. Ha ha ha. And Jeff, please provide us with the answer.
Oh my goodness.
I actually took out
a monster.
It's
a monster.
I did take out a new line of credit to buy the steaks that I cooked for Keisha King, not Jones.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So you said it was $5.61 for bacon.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to go with $6.12.
The answer.
Wait. Before you give me the answer, I want to guess.
Sure.
$7.15. Anybody else want to guess?
Oh.
In some places it's $11, but that's just depending on what store you go to.
I'm going to go with around like 750-ish, about 750, I would say.
Okay.
The correct answer is $7.20. The reason for this price is it turns out that Stacey Abrams had breakfast yesterday, so it's hard finding supplies anywhere in the country. But in all seriousness, and this could be tied to President Joe Biden and his policies, one of the contributing factors has been food processing companies trying to find the labor to work evening and weekend shifts, trying to play a game of catch up. But many workers enjoyed receiving pandemic-era benefits rather than heading to the factory to package a slab of meat. So,
Sarah, we have totally unleashed a monster. I mean, he's not even leaving room for the laugh track.
I know. We're like, he's a monster.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, keep going, Andrew.
So for our next guest, I would ask about Golden Graham cereal, but he's a bit more serious than that. So a more appropriate question would be a bottle of vodka. In 2019, a 750 milliliter bottle of vodka, or as the Americans say, 25-ounce bottle of vodka costs $14.99. What is the answer to this, Mr. Noble?
Well, good grief. I mean, I actually don't drink vodka that often. And when I do, I tend to drink the top shelf stuff. So maybe my idea of what a bottle of vodka probably costs and what a lot of people would pay for it nowadays is different. I'm mostly more of a bourbon man, but I'm going to go with, let's see. I'm going to go with $22.
Whoa, wait. We want to weigh in. Jeff?
I'll go with $17.99.
Sarah?
I don't drink vodka either. I drink wine, and my favorite bottle of wine has gone up from, 25 something to 32. So I'm going to say vodka wise, $20 even.
I'm going for $15.50. What do you got?
The answer is $25. You can go to Russia now and hang out with Vladimir Putin and drink a bottle of Smirnoff. Some experts say that the reason why the bottle of vodka is come so high is because Nancy Pelosi has been raiding liquor stores across the country. She's one of the ringleaders of these retail theft. But other analysts who I've spoken to say that Hillary Clinton has still been drowning her sorrows from the 2016 election loss. And finally, our next contestant apparently has a Noah's Ark on her farm, according to some of my some of my sources. So she may not necessarily have to visit the supermarket like the rest of us uncivilized city folk. So Sarah, the average price for a dozen eggs in 2019 was $1.40. How much do you think it is today?
Full disclosure, I don't buy eggs in the store because I just stop at the neighbors. And farm fresh brown eggs, like right out of the chicken, are like $2.50. So, and they're better.
Can we
but
all wait?
I'm gonna say $2.29.
I vote $3.99. Jeff?
I'll go with $2.29 also.
Graham?
And I would go for $2.80.
The answer is $2.05. A recent note that I saw from
Really?
a market analyst said that too many eggs were living in exile, so we couldn't find enough eggs.
That is so bad.
That is a terrible
dad
yoke.
joke, dad joke,
That
dad
really
joke.
is.
Oh my goodness. Oh, my
Oh,
goodness.
can we make that illegal? I mean,
We're definitely going to be banned and suspended for that.
that was
one.
a shell of a bad joke.
This
That
is
was
getting
worse.
Okay, well, that's it for another episode
Yes.
of Just for Fun. We've got to get out of this before you have a close.
Oh yes, just please be sure to spay and neuter your pets, and it may or may not be in that order. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, we hope you play along with us in it. If you have a game we should play, let us know in the comments below. And if you love Andrew as your host, it won't hurt my feelings. Give him a thumbs up. We're Liberty Nation, where truth and hopefully fun is making a comeback. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, or on them all. As well, Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Thanks so much for tuning in. And remember, surf on over to libertynation.com. Join us on the Member Zone, just $17.76 for the year. Special thanks to our fantastic editor and post coordinator, Frank Diorio, and our executive producer, Sarah Cowgill. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief. Thanks for joining us today. This has been a production of libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback.